Hi everyone, this is Jim. Welcome to this Blitz Chess postmortem video. This is a postmortem of my Blitz Chess game number 34, where I was playing the Sicilian defense and had a good game this time. Actually, it was quite correctly played, and there was only one actual blunder or mistake, and it wasn't until the end game. And until then, actually, the game was within the range of even, plus or minus, throughout. So well played by both sides. So starting out, my opponent was white, played e4, and I went into the Sicilian defense, and we followed the main line here. You can see it's all top moves in the opening book. And at this point, I choose knight c6. I guess a6 is the most popular move these days. That's the Najdorf. And you can also play g6, which would be the dragon, or e6, which is a Scheveningen. So, but I play knight c6, and then the most popular moves here are bishop to c4, attacking this f7 square, or bishop to g5, threatening to take this knight and mess up the pawns, or if I push through with e6, pin the knight. So those are good ways to play, but bishop e3, just going ahead with a normal English attack, is a reasonable way to play as well. But I was sort of expecting him to follow up with f3, and actually he has something different in mind. So according to the opening book, e6 is the most popular move here, but I generally follow up with e5 after bishop e3. It seems to it has pluses and minuses. It gives up this square on d5, so white can occupy that with a piece at some point, and it creates a weakness, but it does chase away this knight, and it slows down this f5 advance, f4 advance. So anyway, he plays knight f3 here. Knight d to b5 is an option too. Although the point with this setup is that this pawn is protected. The bishop is protecting it, and the queen is protecting it. So the knight here, even though it's attacking that pawn and the queen is attacking it, it's well defended, and you could just kick it with a6 at that point. But he goes back to f3, and I follow up with a6 because I don't want this knight coming in here at some inopportune time and ganging up on this. It's a common plan for white to lift his queen and bring the rook over, or even castle queenside, to put more pressure on the backwards d6 pawn. So you have to kind of try and limit that. So we're pretty much out of the opening book at this point. He played bishop e2 here. So let's go and look at the notation tab, and we'll keep the computer on. There was no big tactical opportunities that were missed in this game, so we'll just kind of play through this part, and we'll get to the key point in the end game. But I think the game proceeds kind of logically. Like I said, he had a different plan. So this is not the English attack. This is bishop e2 and castling kingside. It's another way of playing it. He does let me get in this push d5, which is probably okay for me. You can see that the computer still thinks the white has the normal opening advantage, but I thought I was doing okay here. And yeah, the computer did not like the move b4. Let's see if it had a preference for something else. Maybe queen b3. It's an idea, trying to put pressure on this pawn. After b4, I castle, and he starts to put pressure this way. So maybe still about even here. And now he brings his queen out. So it looks like maybe a slightly inaccurate move there. What is the computer like here? Knight to d4. Yeah, I was thinking of that move. I guess bishop takes, pawn takes is okay for me. I get into a similar situation later. Also, just king h8, unpinning this pawn. So this push here is not threatening check, and allowing me to play maybe f5 at some point. Okay, interesting ideas. Rook f d8. Yeah, just developing a rook is a very logical move. Okay, but I wanted to get the bishop on this diagonal. The one drawback of this move is he can jump in immediately with knight e4 and harass the bishop. So so maybe not the best move. So I trade off rather than giving up my dark squared bishop, and develop this way. And I do get my pawn on d4 here, so that's something to play for. It's a protected, it's a passed pawn. It's not protected, it's isolated, so he can gang up on it and try and win it at some point. But it's on the same color as my bishop, so it's well protected there, and it's hard for him to attack. So we've exchanged various pieces and ended up in a situation where we have opposite colored bishops. So in this scenario, especially when there's lots of force, this favors the attacking side. So if white can get an attack going on the light squares, I can't really oppose it very easily. And same thing for me. I should be trying to attack on the dark squares here. But neither of us really manages to get a big attack going. He is taking advantage of it and forcing me to move that pawn here. But as I evacuate the light squares here, it leaves fewer targets for him to attack. And we traded queens here, and I was thinking this was getting towards kind of a drawish situation, although even with the rooks on, it's still quite dangerous, because the rook and the bishop can gang up again on the light squares and attack points that I can't easily defend. But I don't have a lot of weaknesses to attack here. And notice that my isolated pawn is on a dark square and his isolated pawn is on a light square, so neither of us can attack the other player's weaknesses that easily. And so I centralize the king, preparing for the endgame, and try and get my rook active. Getting active pieces is always important at every stage of the game. And I was worried, after this move, bishop here, he's threatening to bring his rook to this square and check and win my bishop. And I don't have any good way to defend against that I saw, because my rook is under attack, so I don't have time to move my king. Although it is possible. Let's see, rook e7, rook d6. Now, so I guess that's not a possible move. So anyway, I played rook to b6 there, and he just traded out. So I thought, and the computer agrees, this is probably a draw at this point. But watch and see what happens. So we're all making, I think, logical moves, trying to... I would like to push my pawn, but I wasn't able to get to this square. If we back up a little bit, I had this idea of coming into this square and pushing my pawn forward, but his king is blocking my progress, and his bishop is blocking that square, so I can't ever get in here to support the pawn. So I was thinking, well, maybe I could go around on the other side, away from his bishop, because his bishop perhaps is out of play over here. So I tried this. As soon as I do that, of course, he doesn't need to occupy this square on e3 anymore, and he brings his king in. So I could go back, but that would just be a repetition. So I wanted to try a little bit harder. And unfortunately now he gets his king active, and he's starting to gobble up these pawns. He's going to win one pawn here. And this is still a draw because of the drawish nature of the opposite colored bishop ending. But in one more move, I guess this is okay here. Right here, okay, it's my turn to move. And there's really only one move that I can play here, and that will allow me to hold a draw. And that is to take the pawn. And I was afraid of taking the pawn. But here, let's watch how that draw would work. So if I take that pawn, this is a new variation, he gets to take this pawn. And that's what I was worried about. He's got two connected passers. But what I can do is I can bring my bishop to this square, check, and he gets out of the way. Let's see, I'll give him the best move. The computer thinks king h5 is best. Let's see, it doesn't matter a whole lot what I do. Say I bring my king in over here to try and stop the pawns, and he can bring the pawn forward, or he can go king h6. Say he tries king h6, I go here, bishop d3, blocking my pawn and trying to keep me out of squares there. I'm just going to stay on this diagonal with my pawn, and eventually he's going to have to push his pawns forward. And now I can just take it. And he has to take back with his king, and I get over here. And you have to ignore what the computer is saying over here, because this is a well-known draw. And if you don't know this, it's in my Chess Basics series, but the bishop and the rook pawn of the wrong color can never promote. So let's see, it's white's turn. He just pushes the pawn forward. I just go to the corner. Sorry, didn't mean to do that. He can try, let's see, I go here. He could try and force me to move my pawn, which, see, I can't go to any of these squares. So my only move is to move the pawn. But he can't ever chase me out of the corner. And so actually, that would be losing for white. He wouldn't do that. Probably somewhere around here. If we back up a little bit. So check there, king there, back to there. He just stays in front of the pawn. And as long as I don't have anything better to do, I can just move my king back and forth forever. The other thing I can do is I can push the pawn, and he can take it. And then I can go back here, and he can go there. That's a stalemate game. That ends the game immediately, because the king has no moves. And that's the problem. This position is just a stalemate. There's no way to force the king out, because the bishop is on a light-colored square, so it can only control these squares. Nobody can chase the king away from the square where it's on. So this is just a draw, and so if we go back, that was kind of a long sequence, but the elements of it are pretty simple. So it's after a5, I just take that pawn, because this is the dangerous pawn. This is the pawn that's on the same square as white's bishop, and so that I can't stop that one from queening with my king. And I let him take my other pawn, and then I put my bishop on this diagonal, and then whenever this pawn goes to g5, I take it, and I just have to get my king in front. So white's only way to try and win this would be to try and bring his king. Let's see, that's my turn. Yeah, I get my king in. After the check, I get my king in quicker. Let's see, one other try. I check with the bishop, and say he comes forward to try and keep my king out of this square, because the real key was my king got to these two squares and then could never be chased away from that. That combined with the bishop taking here. But just king f4 right away then is going to be a draw, because he can't stop me from winning one of these pawns here and sacking the bishop for the other pawn. So if he tries to go back now, I can go here to g3, and if he pushes this pawn, I can just take it. So so there's no way for white to make progress in that scenario. So so his king can't come forward to block my king out. That's the point. After bishop d2 check, the king can't come forward to try and block my king out of these squares, because then I go after the white pawns from behind, and if he stays back, then I go in front of it, and then I just have to sack my bishop for the g-pawn when it shows up on that square. So I just stay on this diagonal with my bishop and bring my king in front. So it's an easy drawing procedure, and I'm going to remember that for the next time I'm in a similar situation. But in the game, I wasn't sure. It's a little bit tricky to work all this out during a blitz game, although there was still time on the clock. This is a 10-minute blitz with 5-second increment, so there was time. But I didn't figure it out. I moved my king to f4, thinking I needed to hold on to that pawn, and then the problem with that is that, and it's interesting, the computer doesn't recognize that it's losing right away. Thinks that, but if you go on a few moves, the computer will figure out pretty quickly that white is winning. So a6 is the move, and then bishop b6, and then h4 was played, and I take it. G takes h4. Yeah, computer is funny here. It thinks it's even at this point. But watch what happens. Ah, there, it's starting to change now. Ah, and there you see, it's figured it out. Yeah, this was a loss all along. It just took a while before the computer was looking deep enough to figure that out. He proceeds with g5. He doesn't worry about this pawn at all. And no matter how I proceed, whether I push my h-pawn or my d-pawn, he's going to queen. And it's really interesting the way this win works. So let's go ahead and play out the rest of the game. So I'm pushing my pawn, and then he comes back to this square to stop that from becoming a queen, and then I can push the other pawn. And that buys him enough time to queen first. Now, it's interesting when you have two separated pawns like that, the bishop can't stop both of them, so one of my pawns is going to become a queen. But because he got the queen first, then I queen, he has one move, and this move is checkmate. And that one move is all you need sometimes. The queen is covering these squares, so my king can't go to any of them, and then this bishop is cutting across the diagonal, covering those two squares, which are the two escape squares for my queen. So very pretty geometric pattern there, and that's an interesting mate with the queen and the bishop cutting off the two escape squares that the king has when the queen is right next to it. So pretty finish, and hope you guys enjoyed that. Leave any comments you have in the section below, and I'll see you again soon. Thanks. Bye.